The wind howled across the empty plains, carrying with it a fine spray of snow that glittered beneath the cold moon. Eli Carter tugged the collar of his coat higher, the fabric stiff with frost, and urged his horse onward. The trail was barely visible now, just faint wagon ruts disappearing beneath the whiteness, but he knew this stretch of land better than most. He'd ridden it since he was young, back when the world felt alive and full of promise. Tonight, it felt hollow. He'd been on the trail for 2 days straight, hauling supplies to a trading post down near Willow Creek. The work was simple, honest, and it kept his mind off the silence that waited for him back home, a small ranch with no one left in it but the ghosts of what might have been. As the snow thickened, Eli slowed his horse. "Easy, boy," he muttered. The animal's breath rose in clouds, ears twitching at the distant sound of a wolf's cry. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing. There was something ahead, a dark shape against the whiteness. He thought it was a stump at first. Then it moved. Eli straightened in the saddle, pulse kicking. "Hey there," he called out, his voice rough from the cold. "You all right?" The figure didn't answer. He drew closer, boots creaking in the stirrups, until the light of his lantern touched upon something small. A child. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, standing barefoot in the snow, a ragged blanket draped around her shoulders. Her lips were blue, her hair a tangled mess of curls half frozen to her cheeks. She clutched a worn-out doll tight against her chest. Eli swung down from his horse in one motion, his heart thudding. "Sweetheart," he said gently, crouching before her. "What are you doing out here?" The girl blinked, dazed, her teeth chattering. "Mama's sick, sir." Her voice was so soft the wind nearly carried it away. Eli's chest tightened. "Sick? Where is she?" The girl pointed behind her, toward the black outline of an old cabin barely standing against the storm. Its door hung loose on one hinge, creaking whenever the wind hit it. Eli didn't hesitate. He lifted the child into his arms. She weighed no more than a sack of grain, and carried her to the cabin. "You're gonna be all right now, you hear?" he murmured. "We'll get you both warm." The door groaned as he pushed it open. Inside was darkness, broken only by the faint glow of dying embers in the hearth. The smell of damp wood and sickness hung thick in the air. Eli set the girl down near the fire and knelt beside her. "Where's your mama, darlin'?" The child pointed to a shape lying under a threadbare quilt in the corner. He rose and crossed the room, boots silent on the rough floorboards. When he reached the cot, he saw her, thin, pale, motionless. Her face was drawn, her breathing shallow. A woman who'd once been strong, now reduced to little more than a whisper. "Ma'am," Eli said softly. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a second, confusion filled them, then gratitude. "You came," she breathed, barely audible. "I reckon I did," Eli replied. "Your girl found me." A faint smile touched her lips. "Annie, she's brave." "That she is." Eli looked around the cabin. Half-splintered walls, empty shelves, one small pot by the fire. There was nothing here to keep them alive through the night. He pulled his coat off and laid it over the woman. "You've got fever," he murmured. "We need to get you to town. There's a doctor in Dry Hollow, about 4 miles east." She shook her head weakly. "Can't make it, not tonight." Eli's jaw tightened. He'd seen sickness take folks before, and he knew that look in her eyes, the quiet acceptance that came when hope had run dry. He wouldn't let it happen again. He gathered kindling, fed the fire until it glowed bright, then took off his gloves to check her pulse. It was faint but steady. She could make it if she had warmth and care. He unhooked a flask from his saddlebag, poured a bit of water, and let a few drops fall against her lips. "Easy now," he said quietly. "You rest, I'll take watch." Behind him, Annie sat by the fire, hugging her knees, eyes wide but dry. She didn't cry. Eli watched her a moment, such small shoulders carrying too much weight. He remembered another winter long ago, when he'd buried his wife and unborn child. The same helplessness, the same cold. He turned back to the woman. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She stirred, whispering, "Clara." "Well, Clara," he said, adjusting the quilt around her. "You hold on, morning's not far." Outside, the wind moaned through the gaps in the cabin walls. Inside, A stranger, a mother, and a child huddled close to a fire that was quickly becoming their only light in the world. Eli sat down near the hearth, his rifle across his knees, eyes on the door. Somewhere beyond the snow, the wolves cried again. But he didn't flinch. He'd made a silent promise the moment he found that little girl in the cold. He would get them both through the night, no matter what it took. The wind had quieted by the time the first gray light began to creep through the cracks in the cabin walls. The storm had passed, leaving the world wrapped in silence and snow. Eli hadn't slept a wink. He sat near the fire, hat low over his brow, feeding the flames every hour to keep the chill at bay. Annie was asleep on a pile of blankets he'd made from his bedroll, her tiny hand still clutching that ragged doll. Every now and then she whimpered in her sleep, mumbling something about her mama. Eli turned his eyes toward Clara. She was still breathing, though shallowly. Her face glistened with sweat, and her lips had gone pale as the ash in the hearth. He could hear the faint rattle in her chest, a sickness deep and stubborn, the kind that came when a winter chill got inside your lungs and refused to leave. He wiped her brow gently with a piece of cloth dipped in melted snow. "Stay with me, Clara," he murmured. "Just a little longer." Her eyes flickered open for a moment. "Annie," she whispered, her voice thin as paper. "She's fine," he assured her. "Warm and safe." A faint smile touched her lips, then faded as she drifted back into unconsciousness. Eli sat back, staring into the flames. Memories pressed close, the kind he tried to keep buried. His wife, Mary, laughing in the doorway of their old ranch house. The sound of her voice when she told him she was with child. And the silence that followed when fever took them both before he could even find a doctor. That had been 5 winters ago, and he'd never forgiven himself. He'd ridden farther than most men since then, always looking for something to fix what broke inside him. Work kept him breathing, but it didn't keep him living. Until now. Until a barefoot girl had stepped out of the snow and called him, "Sir," with those frightened eyes. Eli rubbed a hand across his face and stood. Dawn was breaking fast, painting the snow outside in shades of silver. He needed to make a decision. The doctor in Dry Hollow was their only chance, but getting Clara there would be near impossible in her state. Still, staying here would mean certain death. He walked to the door, cracked it open, and winced as the cold slapped him full in the face. The storm had left snowdrifts knee-deep and the trail half buried. But his horse was still there, tied beneath the half-collapsed porch, steam rising from its nostrils. Eli tightened his jaw. "We're riding soon," he muttered. Behind him, Annie stirred. "Mister?" He turned. She was sitting up now, rubbing her eyes. "Is Mama better?" she asked. He hesitated. Then, kneeling beside her, he said softly, "Not yet, sweetheart. But I'm gonna take her to a man who can help her." Annie's lip trembled. "You mean the doctor?" "That's right." Her small hands fidgeted with the edge of the blanket. "Mama said not to leave her alone." "You won't," he promised. "You're comin' too." Her eyes widened a little, fear and hope tangled together. "You'd take us?" Eli nodded. "Ain't no sense leavin' you two to the cold." He packed his gear quick. What little food he had, the last of the firewood wrapped in oilcloth, his spare blanket, and saddled the horse. Then he carried Clara from the cot, careful as if she were made of glass. She was burning up now, breath shallow and ragged. Annie followed close, holding her doll to her chest. "Her fever's worse," she whispered. "I know," Eli said, mounting up with Clara in his arms. He settled her in front of him, wrapped in his coat, and held her close against his chest to share his warmth. Then he leaned down and lifted Annie onto the saddle behind him. "You hang on tight, darlin'," he said, voice steady. "Ain't gonna be an easy ride." She nodded, tiny arms wrapping around his waist. With a sharp nudge, Eli urged the horse forward. Snow crunched under hooves, the cold air biting their faces as they moved into the open plain. The world was a sea of white, quiet, endless, and unforgiving. The journey was slow. Every few minutes, Eli glanced down to make sure Clara was still breathing. Her head rested against his chest, her skin hot against the cold. Annie clung silently, her small body trembling with exhaustion. Halfway to Dry Hollow, clouds began to gather again, heavy and dark. Eli cursed under his breath. The sky was threatening another storm. He pushed the horse harder. "Come on," Boy, he muttered. Just a little farther. Finally, through the gray haze, he saw the first signs of life. A wisp of chimney smoke, a wooden fence half buried in snow, and the outline of the town ahead. Relief hit him like a wave. But as they crossed the last ridge, Clara stirred weakly. Eli, she whispered. He looked down, startled. You know my name? She smiled faintly, her eyes half open. Annie told me. He swallowed hard. You hang in there, Clara. We're almost. Her body went limp. Eli's heart slammed against his ribs. Clara. He shifted her in his arms, but her head only lolled to the side. Annie gasped behind him. Mama? He didn't answer. He couldn't, not yet. He dug his heels into the horse and rode faster, through the wind, through the snow, through the ache that was suddenly far too familiar. The town bell rang somewhere ahead. And as he thundered down the main street of Dry Hollow, calling for the doctor, the people turned from their windows to watch. A stranger, a child, and a woman barely clinging to life, riding out of the storm as if chased by ghosts. By the time Eli reached Dry Hollow, the morning sun was only a pale glow behind gray clouds. The town looked ghostly under its blanket of snow, shutters closed, smoke rising from a few chimneys, boots crunching faintly in the distance. Eli's horse staggered, breath steaming like smoke from a dying fire, but the rancher pressed on. He pulled up hard in front of the doctor's house, a small building with a white door and a crooked sign that read Dr. Alden Crow, Medicine Surgery. Eli swung down, boots sinking deep into the snow, and gathered Clara in his arms. Annie, stay close, he said. The little girl jumped off the saddle and ran beside him, clutching her doll. She's not waking up, she whispered. Eli banged on the doctor's door with his fist. Doc, you in there? A few seconds later, the door opened. A thin man with silver hair and spectacles blinked at him. Good Lord, Eli Turner. What are you doing out in weather like this? Eli pushed inside without waiting. She's burning up, Doc. I found her and the girl in an old cabin north of the ridge. She won't make it if you don't help her. Dr. Crow shut the door and pointed to the cot near the stove. Lay her down, quick. Eli did as told. The doctor peeled back the coat and placed a hand on Clara's forehead. Fever's bad. How long's she been like this? Don't know, Eli said, voice tight. Couple days maybe. Little one said her mama's been coughing blood. Crow frowned. Lung fever then. Nasty this time of year. He began to mix herbs and hot water, working with steady hands. Get that kettle boiling, and find me some clean cloth. Eli moved fast. He wasn't a doctor, but he'd followed enough trail medics to know the routine. The smell of camphor and pine filled the small room. Annie stood near the stove, silent and trembling. Her wide eyes followed every movement the doctor made. When Crow leaned back at last, wiping sweat from his brow, Clara was breathing again, shallow but steady. She'll live if she's strong, he said. But she needs rest, warmth, and prayer. Eli exhaled, shoulders sagging. Thank you, Doc. Crow nodded toward Annie. And you, little miss, should eat something. I've got bread in the pantry. Annie looked to Eli, unsure. He gave her a small nod, and she hurried off. When she was gone, Crow gave Eli a long look. You bringin' trouble with you, Turner? Eli frowned. What you mean? The doctor sighed. Word's been around. You haven't set foot in these parts in years. Last time you did, you left with a bullet wound and a head full of ghosts. Eli's jaw tightened. I ain't lookin' for trouble, Doc. Just tryin' to keep two souls from freezing to death. Crow softened. I know, son. Just be careful. Some folks don't take kindly to strangers bringing sick outsiders into town. Fever spreads fast. Eli glanced at Clara, her face still pale beneath the lamplight. She's not just anyone. The doctor arched a brow. You know her? Not till last night, Eli said quietly. But, feels like I've been riding toward her my whole damn life. Crow studied him a moment, then nodded. You've always had that kind of heart, Eli. Don't let it kill you again. The hours passed slow. Snow fell outside in steady silence, muffling the world. Annie dozed off by the stove, her small hand clutching her mother's sleeve. Eli sat nearby, his hat pulled low, eyes fixed on the flames. He didn't realize how tired he was until Crow spoke. You should get some rest. I'll rest when she wakes, Eli murmured. The doctor didn't argue. He just left a blanket beside him and stepped into the back room. Sometime before dawn, Clara stirred. Eli's head snapped up. Her eyes were open, faintly, weakly, but open. You rode through the storm, she whispered. You didn't have to. Couldn't do nothing else, he said softly. Didn't seem right to leave you. Her eyes glistened. You don't even know me. He looked down, his voice barely a whisper. Maybe I don't need to. For a long while, they sat in silence, only the crackle of fire between them. Then Clara's hand reached out, trembling, and found his. Outside, the first light of morning touched the snow-covered street. And though Eli Turner didn't know it yet, the ride that had begun with a cry for help would soon lead him to something he thought he'd buried long ago, hope. The sun crept higher over Dry Hollow, painting the snow in soft gold. The storm had passed, leaving the world silent except for the faint creak of wagons and the bark of a distant dog. Inside the doctor's house, the fire burned low, and warmth filled the air like a slow sigh of relief. Eli sat near the window, whittling a small piece of pine into shape, a habit he'd carried since his ranch days. Across the room, Annie giggled softly as she tried to braid her doll's tangled hair. The sound made Eli's lips twitch upward, faint, but real. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. Clara was awake now, propped against a pillow. Her face was still pale, but the fever had broken. The doctor's care, and Eli's stubbornness, had bought her time. She watched the man silently, her expression a mix of gratitude and confusion. You've been here all night, she said softly, voice still rough. Eli shrugged, knife pausing mid-cut. Couldn't let you freeze. She smiled faintly. Most men would have ridden on. Eli's eyes stayed on the wood in his hands. Most men ain't lost as much as I have. Clara tilted her head. You lost someone? He nodded once, jaw tight. Wife. Long time ago. Fever took her too. The words hung heavy between them. Annie looked up briefly, sensing something she didn't understand, then went back to her doll. Clara reached for the cup of water by her bed. I'm sorry, she said quietly. No one deserves to be left alone in this world. Eli looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time saw past the frailty to the strength beneath. The way her hands trembled but still clutched the blanket, the way her eyes stayed clear despite the sickness. There was a kind of quiet courage in her, the kind that reminded him of the woman he'd once loved. Rest easy, he murmured. You'll be strong again soon. But even as he said it, he could feel the weight of town eyes pressing through the window panes. Dry Hollow was a place that noticed everything, who came, who went, who didn't belong. And Eli Turner, returning after years of silence with a sick widow and her child, was something to talk about. By mid-afternoon, whispers had already spread from the saloon to the general store. Eli Turner's back. Brought a woman with him. Some say she's dying. Others say she's a fugitive, hiding from someone back east. Eli ignored it all. He had no use for gossip, only for getting Clara well enough to travel. Still, when he stepped into the street to fetch supplies, the stares followed him. At the general store, old Mrs. Tuttle gave him a look that could have cut ice. Back from the grave, Eli Turner. Didn't think we'd see you again. He tipped his hat politely. Just need some flour, tea, and salt pork, ma'am. She leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. You best be careful bringing sickness into town. Last thing we need's another fever spreading. She ain't a danger, Eli said flatly. Doc Crow says she'll recover. Mrs. Tuttle sniffed. Humph. If the Lord wills it. She wrapped his goods and slid them across. That woman, she your wife? Eli paused, hands tightening on the paper bag. No, ma'am. Her lips twitched into something between curiosity and judgment. Well, maybe she will be soon, if you keep looking after her like that. He didn't reply. He just turned and left, the sound of the bell above the door fading behind him. Back at the doctor's house, Clara was sitting up, trying to eat the broth Crow had left. Annie beamed when she saw Eli return. Mama, he's back. Eli knelt beside her, ruffling her hair. Told you I wouldn't be gone long. Clara smiled, tired but genuine. You shouldn't trouble yourself so much for strangers, Mr. Turner. Maybe I don't see you as strangers anymore, he said quietly. Her eyes softened, and something unspoken passed between them, fragile, new, but real. Annie, sensing the change, crawled up beside her mother and whispered, "Mama, can we stay with him? He's kind." Eli froze, unsure what to say. Clara smiled faintly, brushing the child's hair. "Hush, Annie, the man's done enough." But later that night, after the doctor left and the fire dimmed, Eli found himself staring into the flames, turning her words over in his head. Done enough. Maybe he had, but for reasons he couldn't quite name, he didn't want to walk away. He looked toward the cot where Clara and Annie slept side by side. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window, glowing faintly in the lamplight. Eli leaned back in his chair, a quiet promise forming in his chest. He didn't know what lay ahead, sickness, gossip, heartbreak, but he knew this much. He wasn't about to leave them to face it alone. Not this time. Eli woke before dawn. The fire had gone cold, but he could still hear Clara's soft breathing in the next room. The fever had broken sometime in the night. He sat by the dying embers, rubbing his hands together, listening to the faint wind outside. The storm had passed, but the air still carried that sharp winter edge that crept through bones. A small sound made him turn. It was Annie, standing in the doorway, her blanket trailing behind her. "Is Mama better?" she asked, voice small and sleepy. Eli smiled gently. "She's better, little one. You did good bringing me here." Annie nodded, her eyes wide and honest. "Mama says you're an angel." Eli chuckled softly. "Ain't no angel, sweetheart. Just a man trying to help." He poured her a small tin of warm milk and watched as she sipped it slow, her eyes on the closed door behind him. When Clara stirred later that morning, she found Eli sitting near her bed, half asleep, his hat resting on his knee. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice weak but soft. He opened his eyes and nodded. "Couldn't leave you two in the cold." For a long moment, neither spoke. The light from the window stretched across the small cabin, catching the strands of her hair and the worn lines on his face. Clara smiled faintly. "You've done more than anyone ever has." Eli looked away, his throat tight. "Don't reckon that's true." But she reached for his hand anyway, her fingers trembling, warm against his calloused skin. "It is," she said. "You brought us back from the edge." Days passed. Clara's strength returned, slow but steady. She began to sit up, then move about the cabin. Annie followed Eli everywhere, to the barn, the well, even when he split wood outside. He didn't mind. Her laughter filled the silence he'd grown used to. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Eli stood outside, staring at the glow in their window. He could see their shadows moving inside, the small one helping the taller one fold blankets. It felt like something he'd once dreamed of but never dared to want again. When Clara stepped outside, wrapped in a shawl, she found him staring at the horizon. "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned. "For what?" "For giving my little girl her smile back." He hesitated, his jaw working. "You both gave me something too." She tilted her head. "What's that?" Eli looked down, his voice low. "A reason to come home again." The night grew colder, but they stayed there, two souls who'd found warmth where they never expected it. The wind whispered through the grass, gentle this time, as if even the land itself wanted to listen. And from that night on, Eli stopped sleeping in the barn. He built a small fire by the hearth instead, so the cabin never went dark again. Word travels fast in small towns, even across the empty miles between cabins. By the week's end, folks in Dry Hollow were already whispering about the stranger who'd taken in a sick widow, about the little girl who now followed him like his own shadow. Eli didn't pay it much mind. He'd lived half his life alone. What people said never mattered much. But Clara, she heard the whispers. Every time she rode into town for flour or medicine, she could feel eyes on her back. Mrs. Hargrove from the general store would glance at Eli's wagon, then back at Clara, smiling that polite kind of smile that hides more than it says. "Feelin' better now, Mrs. Gray?" she'd ask. "Yes, ma'am, thanks to Mr. Eli here." Then came the sideways look. I'm sure." Eli noticed the way Clara's hands trembled when she paid for her things. He never said a word, just carried the bags out for her, helping her climb into the wagon as if he didn't notice the gossip around them. The ride home was quiet, only the sound of hooves and wind moving through the open land. Halfway down the trail, Clara finally spoke. "They think I shouldn't be here." Eli kept his eyes on the road. Let me think what they want. I don't want Annie to hear those things. He looked over at her then, her eyes full of worry, her hair blowing wild in the wind. Your girl's got more sense than any of me, he said softly. She knows kindness when she sees it. That night, Clara sat by the fire while Eli fixed a loose board near the window. Annie had already gone to sleep, her small form curled beneath a quilt. The quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm. Like two folks who'd finally found a rhythm they didn't want to lose. Eli, Clara said after a while, her voice low. What were you before this? Before you found us? He paused, staring at the wood plank in his hands. Drifter, mostly. Broke more horses than I can count. Lost more sleep than I should've. And now? He looked up, meeting her gaze across the flickering firelight. Now, I don't feel like I'm drifting, no more. Clara's eyes softened. You saved my life. He shook his head. You just needed a chance to rest. Her smile came faint, quiet. Maybe so, but you gave me that chance. The wind howled outside, but inside that small cabin, there was warmth, not just from the fire, but from something growing slowly between them. Later that night, when Eli stepped outside, he looked up at the cold stars scattered above the valley. He hadn't prayed in years, not since the war, but that night he whispered a few words, something about keeping them safe, keeping them together. And for the first time in a long while, he believed maybe someone was listening. Snow had started to melt along the ridge, leaving muddy tracks on the trail. Eli had gone out early to check the horses when he saw the dust cloud rising in the distance. A rider, coming fast. He waited by the fence, one hand resting on the post, the other near his sidearm. When the rider finally slowed, Eli saw the man's face, not a stranger, but someone he hadn't expected to see again. Morning, Eli, the man called out, voice rough from the road. Luke Garner, Eli said, steady? Didn't think you'd ride this far out. Luke swung off his horse and dusted off his coat. Word in town said you took in a woman. Thought that couldn't be true. Eli didn't answer. He didn't like the way Luke was looking toward the cabin. The door opened then. Clara stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. When her eyes met Luke's, the color drained from her face. Clara? Luke said with a half smile. I'll be damned. Annie peeked from behind her mother's skirt, clutching her doll tight. Luke, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. You shouldn't be here. Now don't say that, he replied, taking a slow step closer. You left in quite a hurry last winter. Folks back in Willow Creek still talking. Eli stepped between them. You got something to say it. Luke's grin turned thin and cold. Just thinking it's strange, her living out here with a man like you. No ring, no name change. People will start wondering. Let me, Eli said flatly. Now get off my land. Luke's eyes hardened. He spat into the dirt, swung back onto his horse, and said, she ain't worth the trouble, Eli. You'll see. Then he rode off, leaving a trail of dust and unease behind him. Inside, Clara sat by the fire, pale and shaking. He was my husband's friend, she said quietly. Before the fever took him. Luke came around after, said he'd help with Annie. But she stopped, eyes filling. He wasn't kind. When I refused him, he told everyone I ran off with another man. Eli crouched beside her. He won't bother you again. You can't know that. I do, he said. Because I'll be here if he tries. Annie came over then, small and sleepy-eyed. Mama, who was that man? Clara pulled her close. Just someone who forgot how to be good. That night, the storm rolled in heavy, thunder echoing through the valley. Eli sat by the window, rifle resting on his knee, watching the dark beyond the glass. He'd faced outlaws before, hunger, blizzards, even death. But this felt different. This time, he wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for something worth keeping. The wind picked up that night, howling through the cracks of the old ranch house. Rain pounded on the roof, and thunder rolled like distant gunfire. Eli had kept the lamp burning low, shadows flickering across the wooden walls. Clara and Annie slept in the back room, their soft breaths almost lost in the storm. But Eli couldn't sleep. He knew the way Luke had looked at Clara, like a man who couldn't stand to lose. He'd seen that look before, too many times. It never ended with words. He stood by the window, watching the tree line. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, he saw it. A horse tied just beyond the barn. Someone was out there. Eli moved quick. He grabbed his rifle, slipped on his coat, and stepped out into the rain. The cold bit at his skin as he crossed the yard, boots sinking into the mud. He circled the barn slow, silent, every sense sharpened. Then a voice came from the dark. "You should have stayed out of this, Eli." It was Luke. He stepped out, soaked to the bone, pistol glinting under the flash of lightning. "I told you to leave," Eli said. "And I told you she ain't yours," Luke spat back. "She's a liar, and a thief. She took what belonged to me." Eli tightened his grip on the rifle. The only thing she took was her freedom. Luke's eyes went wild. "Then I'll take it back." A crack split the night, not thunder this time, but a gunshot. Eli ducked behind the fence post, fired once, the muzzle flash lighting the rain. Luke's shot tore through the barn door. Horses screamed inside. The storm swallowed everything, wind, rain, thunder, and gunfire blending into one furious sound. Inside the cabin, Clara woke with a start. She grabbed Annie, holding her tight. "Stay down, sweetheart," she whispered. When another shot rang out, she ran to the door, heart pounding. "Eli," she screamed into the storm. Eli turned at her voice, and that's when Luke rushed from the side. They crashed into the mud, fists and fury. The pistol slid away, swallowed by the rain. Luke swung wild, shouting curses lost in the thunder. Eli shoved him back, grabbed his collar, and slammed him into the ground. "Stay down," Eli roared. But Luke didn't listen. He lunged again, and Eli fired. The sound echoed through the valley. For a long time after, only the rain moved. Clara ran to the yard, her nightdress clinging to her skin, eyes wide with fear. Eli stood there, chest heaving, rain dripping from his hat brim. Luke lay still in the mud, the storm washing away the blood. Clara stopped beside Eli, trembling. "It's over?" Eli looked at her, tired, soaked, and solemn. "It's over now." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Together, they walked back toward the cabin, the light of the fire flickering through the window. A small, stubborn glow in the darkness. Behind them, the storm began to ease. The rain slowed, the thunder faded, and in the cold, quiet air, the first hint of dawn began to rise over the plains. When morning came, the storm was gone. The world lay quiet under a pale, washed-out sky. Puddles shimmered in the dirt yard, and steam rose from the soaked earth like breath from a tired giant. Eli stood on the porch, his coat still wet, hat in his hands. The smell of gunpowder still clung to the air. He watched the horizon, where the sun was trying its best to break through the gray. Behind him, the cabin door opened softly. Clara stepped out, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was loose, still damp, and her eyes were red from crying. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore, it was full of things they didn't yet know how to say. Clara walked to the edge of the porch and looked toward the barn, where Luke's horse still stood, untethered now, grazing in the wet grass. "He's gone," Eli said quietly. "I sent a rider to town before sunrise. Sheriff will handle the rest." She nodded, voice trembling. "It wasn't your fault." He turned to her, brow furrowed. "Maybe, but it don't make it right." Clara reached out, touched his arm. "Eli," she whispered, "you saved us. You didn't have a choice." He met her eyes then, soft and tired, but steady. Something in that look made her heart ache. Annie came running from inside, clutching her little doll. "Mama," she cried, running straight into Clara's arms. Clara knelt, hugging her tight. "It's all right, baby. We're safe now." Eli turned away, giving them space. But Annie peeked over her mother's shoulder and said, "Mr. Eli, are you staying?" He smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "Don't rightly know yet, little one." Clara stood, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You could," she said softly. "You could stay, at least until spring." Eli's jaw tightened. "And after that?" She didn't answer right away. The wind moved through her hair, gentle this time. "After that," she said finally, "we'll see where the river takes us." They both looked out toward the hills, where the morning light touched the wet fields. It wasn't the end of the story, not yet. But for the first time, it felt like the beginning of peace. Eli put his hat back on. "I'll check the fences," he said, his voice quieter now. Clara smiled faintly. "And I'll make breakfast." As he walked toward the barn, she watched him go, shoulders broad, step slow but sure. Something warm settled in her chest. Not joy exactly, not yet, but hope. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, the wind was calm. And somewhere in between, two souls who'd nearly lost everything found a reason to stay a little longer. Winter left slow that year. Snow turned to rain, and the rain gave way to green. The hills around the ranch bloomed with wildflowers, yellow, white, soft blue like pieces of the sky that had fallen to earth. Clara's health came back little by little. At first, she could only walk from the bed to the porch. Then, one morning, Eli looked up from the pasture and saw her hanging laundry on the line, the wind tugging at her hair. He smiled to himself, the kind of smile a man doesn't show anyone. Annie had grown bolder too. She followed Eli everywhere, to the barn, to the fields, even when he fixed the broken gate. When he lifted her up to see a newborn calf, she giggled so loud even the horses turned to look. Sometimes Clara would stand in the doorway, watching them. Eli never said much, but his kindness was louder than any words could be. He'd built a new fence, fixed the roof, planted a garden near the porch, and somehow, without ever saying it, he made their house a home. One evening, when the light was soft and gold, Clara brought out supper. They ate outside, the sound of crickets rising from the grass. Annie fell asleep against her mother's arm, and the night grew still. Eli looked out at the sky. "Didn't think peace would ever find me again," he said quietly. Clara looked at him, her eyes gentle. "Maybe it didn't find you," she said. "Maybe you found it, right here." He met her gaze, and for the first time, he didn't look away. In the glow of the fading sun, her face looked like something carved by hope itself, soft, real, and strong. "I rode through a lot of empty country before I found this place," Eli said. She smiled. "And now?" He took a breath. "Now I don't plan on riding away again." For a long moment, there was nothing but the wind, warm, calm, and full of promise. Then Clara reached across the table and took his hand. The story didn't need a grand ending, just the quiet truth that love had returned to a house that once held only silence. That night, as the moon rose over Dry Hollow, the ranch stood peaceful. The storm had passed. The scars of the past were fading. And from somewhere beyond the hills, the wind carried a whisper of love found in unlikely places, and hearts brave enough to begin again. Because sometimes, the West wasn't just about who could ride the farthest or fight the hardest. Sometimes, it was about who could stay.